Hi Pine Class, it's time for part 4 of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and to find out what's been happening to Edmund. Edmund was indeed making his way to the White Witch's house. After a long and bitterly cold walk through snowy, icy drifts, he came to it at last. The iron gate stood wide open, and he made his way cautiously through a courtyard filled with stone statues. Across the threshold lay a great wolf. It rose, the hair bristling along its back, and growled, "Who's there?" "If you please, sir," said Edmund, trembling. "I'm the boy that Her Majesty met in the wood the other day." The wolf vanished into the house, and Edmund followed. "How dare you come alone?" cried the witch in a terrible voice. "I've brought the others quite close, Your Majesty," stuttered Edmund. "They're with Mr. and Mrs. Beaver." A cruel smile came over the witch's face, until Edmund told her all he'd heard before leaving the Beaver's house. "What?" "Aslan!" cried the Queen, and clapped her hands. Instantly the dwarf disappeared. "Make ready our sledge," she ordered. In the meantime, Mr. and Mrs. Beaver were leading the children along the riverbank. At last, when Lucy was so tired that she almost was asleep on her feet, they came to a snug little hole where they could spend the night. They awoke to the sound of jingling bells. Mr. Beaver was out of the cave like a flash. Then they heard him shout, "It's all right! Come out, everyone! It isn't her!" They all scrambled up the steep bank, and there, on his sledge, sat Father Christmas, big and glad. "I've come at last," he said. "The White Witch has kept me out for a long time, but her magic is weakening. Aslan is on the move. And now for your presents," he smiled. "Mrs. Beaver, a new sewing machine is waiting for you at your home, and Mr. Beaver, you will find your new dam quite finished." The kind creatures were so pleased they could hardly speak. Then Father Christmas gave Peter a magnificent sword and shield. For Susan, there was a bow and a quiver of arrows, and a little horn. Last of all, he gave Lucy a clear crystal bottle and a small dagger. "In this bottle," he said, "there is a cordial made of the juice of the fire flowers. If you or any of your friends is hurt, a few drops of this will restore them." Then he cried out, "Merry Christmas! Long live the true king!" and drove out of sight. "It is time we were moving on," said Mr. Beaver. Edmund, meanwhile, had been having a horrible time. When he asked the White Witch for Turkish delight, she merely said, "Silence, fool!" And as they sped through the darkness, he felt colder and more miserable than ever before in his life. It didn't look now as if she intended to make him a king, and he longed to be with the others. At last morning came, and they were travelling along in daylight. Suddenly, the witch stopped the sledge. Nearby sat a merry party celebrating the return of Father Christmas. In fury, the witch turned them all to stone, and Edmund, for the first time, felt sorry for someone besides himself. As they raced on again, Edmund noticed that he was feeling much less cold. Soon, patches of green began to show through the snow. The sledge gradually came to a halt, and the witch ordered them to leave it behind and walk. When Edmund heard birds singing, his heart leapt, for he realised that the witch's cruel winter was over. Miles away, the other children were walking into what seemed a delicious dream, through warm sunlight into green thickets and mossy glades. "Not long now," said Mr. Beaver, and began leading them up a hill. At the top of it stood the stone table, and nearby all sorts of wonderful creatures were gathered around Aslan himself: centaurs and unicorns, wood nymphs and water sprites, deer and great birds. The children could hardly look into the lion's royal, solemn eyes, for he was both good and terrible at the same time. Finally, Peter stepped forward and said, "We have come, Aslan." "Welcome, Peter, son of Adam," said Aslan. "Welcome, Susan and Lucy, daughters of Eve. Welcome, he-beaver and she-beaver." His voice was deep and rich. "But where is the fourth?" "He has betrayed them and joined the White Witch," said Mr. Beaver. "Please, Aslan, can anything be done to save Edmund?" said Lucy. "All shall be done," said Aslan. Then he said to Peter, "Come, son of Adam, and I will show you the castle of Cair Paravel, for you are the firstborn and will be High King of Narnia over all the rest." That's it for part 4. We'll have part 5 tomorrow.